Micropulse presents The 50 Years Detective. Half a century, 5 decades spent tracing a map of human failure, from the neon hum of the city into the dust-choked backroads of the high country. They say time heals all wounds, but 50 years of chasing ghosts across state lines has just made the scars itch. I'm Thomas Furlong, and this is just a simple narration of real detective work done on real cases handled by me. A Dallas murder avenged, prompt arrests and conviction of the murderer, and suicide of the instigator of the crime while awaiting trial. Early in the 1890s, I received a telegram from James Arnold, Chief of Police of Dallas, Texas, and Ben Cable, County Sheriff of Dallas, Texas, requesting me to come to Dallas immediately for consultation in a murder case. Knowing both gentlemen well, having done business with them before, I answered that I would start for Dallas the following day, which I did. I arrived in Dallas late on Wednesday evening. I found Chief Arnold and Sheriff Cable waiting for me at the depot. We went to my hotel immediately, where we could have a quiet conference. For obvious reasons, I will not give the true names of the principals connected with this dastardly crime, but will state the actual facts which led to the arrest and conviction of the murderer and to the suicide of the real principal. The chief and sheriff told me the nature of the case. They said that on Sunday night preceding, a prominent citizen of Dallas, whom I will call Temple, had boarded a heavily loaded electric car downtown in front of one of the principal churches for his home. The car had at least 40 or 50 passengers, most of whom were returning home from the evening services which Temple had attended. Temple lived on the outer edge of the city, in the better residence portion. When the car reached his home, he got off and started towards his front gate. There were a number of shade trees in front of his home. The street at this point was well lit by arc lights, one of which was suspended above the point where he had left the car. As he stepped from the street to the edge of the sidewalk, a colored man, who had been concealed behind a shade tree, sprang out and was seen by a number of passengers to strike Temple a powerful blow on the head with something like a baseball bat. After striking the blow, the Negro dropped his weapon and his hat and fled into an alley, disappearing in the darkness. The people who had witnessed the assault hastened to Temple, who lay unconscious on the sidewalk, picked him up, and carried him into his house. Doctors were summoned and found that Temple's head had been split from the crown to the level of his eyes. He was still breathing, but only lived a few moments, never regaining consciousness. The chief and the sheriff found that the weapon was a piece of 1.5-inch gas pipe, near 4 feet long. The blow was so powerful that it bent the pipe midway to almost an L shape. They also found the hat, a new, cheap, broad-brimmed black hat, and was unusually large size. It was too large for any ordinary-sized head, and indicated to me that it was probably too large for the wearer, and for that reason had fallen off with the first violent move the wearer had made. The witnesses described him as a young Negro, very black, about 5 feet 8 inches tall, well-built, and apparently well-dressed. They all agreed that he had the features of a white man, thin lips, straight nose, and regular features. In fact, a number believed him to be a white man who had blackened his face. I learned that Temple had a brother, a prominent physician who lived in Springfield, Illinois. The doctor was anxious to have his brother's assassin brought to justice. After making an appointment with Sheriff Cable, I retired. Next morning, we went over the ground. I noticed that this pipe was new and had been cut from the end of a long joint.
It was evident to me that it had been cut to the proper length so that he, the assassin, could conceal it in carrying it to the place of the murder. I began my investigation. I found that Mr. Temple had been superintendent of a Sunday school. He was also in the wholesale lumber business, associated with two parties. One of them I will call Smith, and the other Perry. When the partnership had been formed, they agreed to take out a $10,000 life insurance policy on each other's life and to carry these policies on the company funds. At noon, on the second day after my arrival, it was raining. There was a fine-looking young woman coming across the street. I noticed that she was a colored girl, but about as white as myself. Her hair was kinky and of deep reddish color. She was tall, well-dressed, but had large brown freckles. Dr. Temple laid a hand on my shoulder. He said in an undertone, "What do you think of her?" I said, "She's a freak of nature." He answered, "Yes, she is a freak of nature. I noticed her yesterday in that building where my brother had his office. She appeared to be having an earnest conversation with the janitor." I decided that I would find out who she was. The sheriff said, "That girl is known as Liza Johnson. She's a good girl." I called on Miss Emma Johnson. I said, "I want to know something about your maid, Liza. I understand that she has been seen in an office building over on Commerce Street." Emma replied, "About a month ago, the Negroes here in Dallas had a picnic. She met a young Negro there. He was black as ink, though, but had good features like those of a white man. He had thin lips, small mouth, and straight nose." This was an exact description of the slayer of Mr. Temple. She continued, "He's acting as sort of a body servant to his master, who has an office in that building on Commerce Street." I asked, "What is his name? Was Mr. Perry's name?" "Yes," she answered, "that's it, John Perry. But John is not in town now. He left town last Monday. He told Liza he was going to San Antonio to attend the races. He writes her every day, though, and she got a letter from him this morning." I located a plumbing shop. The brother of the proprietor recognized the piece of pipe. He said he had cut it from a large joint for a Negro the Friday before the murder. I arranged for the boy to accompany me to San Antonio. We left Dallas that night. Arriving in San Antonio, the hotel clerk brought me a telegram from Sheriff Cable. It read, "Go to San Angelo, Texas at once." I took the first train. I learned that the Negro, John Perry, had left San Angelo with a ticket to Lampasas. We arrived in Lampasas about 8 a.m. Monday morning. It was court week. As we neared the post office, the boy from Dallas called my attention to a colored man wearing a light fedora hat with a blue serge suit. The boy pointed to him and said, "That's the nigger that I sold that piece of pipe to." John reached the window and received a letter. He walked round the corner, took from it a couple of banknotes, and proceeded to read the letter. I suddenly threw a .41 caliber Colt revolver in his face, commanding him to throw up his hands. To my surprise, he suddenly plunged his hands inside the waist of his trousers and attempted to draw a 9-inch barrel .45 caliber Colt concealed under his vest. Before he could draw it, I seized his hand and his revolver. A man who was standing very close yelled, "Hey, hey, I'm the sheriff of this county, and I command peace." I replied, "Mr. Sheriff, take hold of this Negro. I am an officer from Dallas, and I have arrested him for murdering a white man there." I took from him the letter he had just received. It was from the white John Perry in Dallas. It said, "I enclose you $100, on receipt of which you must go quietly and at once to the city of Mexico. Detectives are on to us, and you must not let them catch you. It would be fatal." I instructed the sheriff to feed the prisoner, but not to allow him a knife. I had just gone into the dining room when a deputy sheriff rushed in. He said excitedly, "Come to the jail at once. That nigger of yours has cut his damn head nearly off." I found the prisoner lying on the iron floor with his throat cut almost from ear to ear. The old jailer evidently forgotten my instructions and gave the prisoner his pocket knife to remove a sliver from his finger. Perry began to feel better, and he told me that his young master, the White John Perry, had induced him to come to Dallas for the purpose of killing his partner, Mr. Temple. He said his master threatened to kill him unless he did so. I wrote a telegram to Sheriff Cable. It read, "Negro has cut his throat and is dying. Give this message to the newspapers and have them get out an extra at once." I wanted the White John Perry to think his accomplice was dead. The White John Perry read the account and at once left his office. On his way home, he stopped at every saloon en route. They numbered 13 in all, and he took a large drink at each place. 2 hours later, I sent a second message, "Negro doing well. Arrest John Perry on charge of complicity in Temple murder." The master, John Perry, was a prisoner in the jail when we arrived. He immediately attempted to kill himself by butting his head against the steel bars of his cell. He was innocent, he declared. About 5 days later, a young society woman sent him a luncheon.
Perry suddenly struck the cut glass plate on the steel floor. He picked up a large triangular-shaped piece of glass and plunged it into his throat. He twisted the glass, severing the jugular vein, causing his death in a few minutes. Thus ended the existence of the White John Perry. The colored man pleaded guilty and was sentenced to the state prison for life. I believe this to be the quickest time ever made in working up a case and capturing the guilty parties in a crime of this magnitude. I have never doubted that it was a case of remorse that caused the White John Perry to commit suicide, not humiliation. Subscribe to Micro Pulse for upcoming episodes. Our next episode, The Toughest of Tough Towns.